Welcome to the Believe Again podcast. I am your host, Josh Robry, and with each episode, I hope this podcast inspires you to live an enjoyable, meaningful Christianity. And I want to do that by bringing you stories that are real, raw, and refreshing. That's exactly how I would describe what I want people to experience when they read my book, Believe Again, Finding Faith After Losing Religion. And now that book's written and published and won't be anything added to it that I know of, I wondered, how can we keep some of the best things that happened in that book moving forward? And a podcast is a great way for me to be able to do that, because when I was writing the book and really just experiencing the book, living out what I wrote about, I was talking to my wife, Amy, and I was just talking to her about the book, talking to her about what I was learning. And she says, Josh, if you really want this to hit home with people, you have to talk about the people that you're meeting along the way, not just what you're learning. And that ended up being one of the best pieces of advice I ever got, because in my journey where Amy and I spent about 2 years outside of working in full-time ministry, after only working in ministry after college for 7 years, and even working pretty much exclusively at my church for years leading up to that. I went through a huge transformation during that time. And a lot of that was from unconventional mentors, friends who maybe didn't have a voice in my life before, who now had a voice in my life. And those people really challenged and stretched my faith. And that's what I hope that this podcast can do for you. That's what I hope my book can do for you. And one of the people who challenged and stretched my faith the most is my friend, Aaron Vogel, who is also the guest on today's episode. So our conversation actually went really long. And so we're going to divide it into 2 parts. That's pretty typical for me and Aaron. If you've been around me for more than 5 minutes, I like to talk, and Aaron likes to talk about as much as I do. So when we get together, it's an hour and a half minimum conversation. So we divided it into 2 podcasts for you to enjoy, one this week, one next week. And this first episode, it's going to be really great for anyone that's ever wanted to work in ministry and was no longer working in ministry, who's ever gone through a transition in and out of ministry, whether good or bad. And you just kind of want to hear what other people's experience like. Maybe you're a pastor and, transitioning people on and off of your team is going to be part of what you do. This podcast will be great for you. And it's also good for those who maybe are interning at a church, or maybe wish they worked at a church, but how can they get that value and meaning that they're making a difference as they would working at a church, even though their paycheck isn't coming from the church? This podcast is going to be great for you. Aaron and I share both of our stories of transitioning off of church staffs, what that season was like, what drove our decision-making process during that time. And Aaron actually turned his transition into a career where he launched several businesses. Now he's a very successful business person. His restaurant has, I think, 7 locations across 3 different states. He has a coffee brand that is doing mission work, that is providing for nonprofits in New Orleans. Just a really, really great story of God using someone in maybe an unconventional way outside of the walls of church, as well as remaining faithful in the church as well. So I hope you enjoy hearing from Aaron today. And this is part 1 of my conversation with him. All right, everyone, welcome to the Believe Again podcast. My name is Josh Robry, your host, and I have the pleasure of interviewing my good friend, Aaron Vogel, Donut Mogul, former youth pastor, entrepreneur, just an all-around amazing guy who I had the pleasure of calling my friend, and looking forward to interviewing today, Aaron.
Cool, man. Thanks for having me. Go Braves.
Go Braves. Yeah. And we're playing the Brewers right now. And
my mom is from Milwaukee, so sarcastically, go Braves. So I'm really Brew Crew all the way.
Yeah, all the way. And I didn't put this in your introduction, but youth pastor again. So you want to
one
tell
more
everybody?
time? Well, what's better than being a youth pastor once? And it would be being a youth pastor twice.
Yeah. So,
but this time, my boys are in the student ministry, which is obviously a big change for me. Last time when I got out of the game, as it were, my oldest was about 8, and now he's 17. And so it is really neat. 17, 15, 13-year-old are my three boys, and all of them are in the student ministry. So it's very different this time around for sure, and unique compared to the last round.
You got to be loving it, bringing all this life experience to this. It's got to be like a Major League Baseball player going back and playing high school baseball, huh?
Yeah. Good way to put it, for sure.
Well, I have a lot of questions for you, but I want everyone to just kind of get to know you a little bit. So why don't you tell everybody about the business that you run and a little bit about yourself and your family?
Yeah. So married 18 years, 4 biological children, 3 boys and then a girl, 17, 15, 13, and 10 while we're recording this. And we've been fostering since 2015, so about 6 years or so now total. And this little girl we have with us now for almost 2 years next month. She's from Honduras. She had only come to the States she had been in the States for about 7 months when she came into care with us. And so she didn't speak a word of English. That's been a really, really unique experience. So 5 kids in the house. And then we thought, why not complicate it? We had our first family dog around the same time. So that's family life. And then as far as business goes, got into the restaurant business as an entrepreneur with 2 business partners in 2013. We launched in New Orleans on Magazine Street. And we now have, we have 8 restaurants, about to open our 9th. And we have a coffee roastery and a commissary kitchen. So right now we have 10 kind of operations up and running, and all in the middle of COVID and Hurricane Ida here recently passed. So it's been a fun time in New Orleans in the restaurant business. But that's about what we've been doing as far as work and stuff as well.
Man, that's a lot. That's the family sounds full time, much less all that you're doing for work.
Yeah. It's a couple full-time jobs there for sure. My wife stays home, so she has the more full-time job with the kids and taking care of the house and family, different things like that. Obviously, they're all super active, teenage years, so a lot going on there. And then the student pastor opportunity came along. Our guy who had been taking responsibility for that at the church we're at, he was doing that for about 10 years, and they were making a transition with him out. It was anticipated, but they didn't really have a guy from the inside. And so it was just like, hey, I guess I could do that for a while if you guys want. Yeah. So just seemed natural.
With all the free time that you have, just made sense for you to step up and youth pastor. So we were close enough that you and I got to see each other at stuff. Our churches did stuff together. And, when I look back, you were always somebody that I felt like was a friend that I wanted to have in my life. But I didn't feel, not because of you, but because of myself, that I was never really able to fully be my vulnerable self around you. And because that probably hurt our relationship a little bit, because I felt like I had to kind of hold a certain line as a staff member of my church. But we didn't talk for a couple of years after that. And that always hurt me. And I remember my last day at the church, I think you were like the first person that I called and said, man, I've been an idiot. I've been a terrible friend. I know that there's no reason for you to forgive me for the way that I've treated you. But if you would, I would love a fresh start because you're someone I've always respected. And man, when you said that, no problem, right away, I forgive you, let's start back over. That was one of the biggest gifts anyone's ever given me in my life. And I just want to say thank you for doing that.
That's cool, man. But a really, really good story about 2 people showing humility and reciprocating, back and forth. Who knows what happened in the past, and all of those things are usually forgettable. But when you live in forgiveness, and humility toward one another, obviously now years and years later, we're still hanging out and, families, and obviously we live in different spaces, but what a really, really great story of what could be, as long as people are following in Christ's likeness, that they could share in relationship, even though, tough things have happened in the past. So I appreciate you sharing that. Good memories for sure.
Yeah. I mean, we had some good times and we had some tough moments, and then, we reconnected, and you became one of the most formative relationships during the most formative season of my life. after I had left my position at my church, and did not go on staff at another church, and instead decided to spend a season. Didn't know how long it was going to be. I thought it might be 6 months at the most, but it ended up being a little bit over 2 years, where Amy and I would not work at a church, but instead would grow and heal and kind of figure out more about what we believe about God, ourselves, and the church. And you became an important, pivotal relationship during that time. I write about you a lot in the book, so I almost need to give you co-authorship status in my book, because some of the best conversations I had during that time were with you. And I remember right off the bat, I had that first conversation with you. And I remember the second time I called you, it was like, okay, is Aaron going to pick up? How's this going to go? It's just going to be weird, because I'd really been a jerk to you. And you were very, which it seems to be a theme. I've already interviewed Mark Poland and on this podcast, and he wanted to plant a church at the Ark, and I told him no. And now we're good friends. So it seems to be that I start off as a jerk, but after that, it all gets good.
Well, dude, I would just look at it like this: like every time you're a jerk, you are about to celebrate a long-term friendship, man. That's
yes.
What. Spin it, man. Spin it.
I guess so. And there were so many jerky things that I said, if we could sidetrack here a little bit, that I don't even like, I couldn't even as I was saying them, I was like, why am I saying this? I'm like, we joked before we started the podcast, because I'm dressed really casual and you're dressed up with a collar a little bit. Normally it's the opposite. I always dress a little bit. You're always in a t-shirt and a hat. And I remember one time we went to meet for dinner at on Magazine Street. What is that taco place, that Jamaican place, Caribbean place? Rum House.
Oh yeah.
Rum House. We didn't consume any rum. But we went to the Rum House.
We probably wish we could have back in those days. Huh?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I had ordered something. You're like, what's in that? I was like, I think it's a lemonade. I'm not sure. But
happened to be a $13 lemonade. It was the strangest thing, dude.
Why are these lemonades so expensive here? And why am I laughing
no
so
refills?
much?
No refills on the lemonade? What's up?
Anyway, and so we were there, and I remember like you were wearing like a t-shirt, and I was dressed up, and I mentioned something to you like, why are you wearing a t-shirt? And you're like, well, why are you dressed up? I'm like, well, I'm having dinner with friends. What else would I wear? My mindset was so fixated on like, you have to like look a certain way and be a certain way all the time. I couldn't even, I was not in ministry for a good 6 months at that point. And it took me a while to think that you can be spiritual and wear a t-shirt.
Yeah, dude. Honestly, man, who hangs out with friends in tees on Magazine Street in New Orleans, bro?
It's like, this dude's wearing shorts and a t-shirt. Bro, I drove all the way from Baton Rouge for this.
Right.
So, yeah. And I remember one of the conversations, we had when I called you, it's like, I was so depressed. I mean, I was interviewing for all these church jobs, but you kept telling me not to go work at a church. You're one of those people. Do you remember any of that, and why you were encouraging me to not do that?
Yeah, man, I do. I think, I don't know. Again, I don't look back and say like I had high level awareness. I guess maybe there was intuition probably at the best. That said, like, just knowing you, it seemed like the Lord took you out of that church environment. And maybe particular to the space you were in at the time, but probably something inside of me at the time thought maybe particular to just not wanting you to be in a church. I think usually, when people extract from an environment that's pretty formative, and sometimes, your experience was you had a tough time in that space, that decompression time is valuable. So probably I would imagine I had an intuition as I reflect on it now. I guess my best language would have been, it just seems like you need some space and time to kind of reframe what it is to be around the church, or to be in the church, or to be employed by a church, and the role of a pastor, the role of a shepherd or a leader, and what that would look like. And I also understood kind of the value of being a part of a church environment and then not being a part of a church environment in terms of vocation. And And, 2009 was my story where I was, taken out of that employment environment, but still served inside of the church. And I just know how much that served me to be able to walk in the shoes of people who were experiencing life in, all the ways that all of us do, but also, there was no prop in their life about, how expectations were on them or pedestaled kind of, oh, well, these people are a little bit more spiritual. Just what does it look like to live like everyday life and sit in a chair and kind of experience God's word coming to them through other people, and not necessarily being the leader and the orchestrator and the administrator in those environments, but rather just truly being served by those environments. And I think like when we learn how to be served in those environments rather than always serving in those environments, we're understanding what 99 out of 100 people experience when they walk into church. And then to be employed in a different space where people who are far from God and people who are sad and lonely and depressed and angry and bitter and have poor church experiences, or some have excellent church experiences, and they read the scripture and they pray and they know what it means to work in a workspace that is not centered around Jesus, and how to do that well and how to do it for a while and how to endure hardship from leaders and employers who don't have your best interest in mind, both externally or internally, right? And I think what a gift it is for people to be able to walk in the shoes of people that maybe they'll one day serve again. I always saw you as a guy who the Lord would use you in a local church environment. And obviously with what you're doing today is certainly that. But to be able to experience the outside of that. And, we walk, I think, a little softer with people when we understand spaces that they've been in, and what's, reading your Bible and praying is not like part of your 8-hour workday. And it's like, oh, dude, you have to wake up at 5 to do that. And you really don't want to wake up at 5 to do that. You can't do it at 8:30, 9 o'clock, 9:30 in the morning after you drop all your kids off from school, go get a good workout in, have a smoothie, and be like, I guess it's time to read and pray. It's different, right? And so I think it's a gift on both sides. Obviously, that's what a privilege and an honor that the Lord would invite some people into a space to do that for a living. And clearly, reading your Bible and praying is not a full-time job for pastors, and I'm not saying it is, but what a gift that is. But equally as much, what a gift it is to be able to learn the other side of it. So that was always, I guess, like if I could use words today, as to what my intuition was then. And it's tough to continue traveling in church environments and serving people in the middle of wounds, right? And we can do it, and I think people do it all the time. But I think the opposite is like, man, what a treat it would really be to be able to be healed without expectations upon you, and to just kind of be in the middle of life without people thinking you're someone special, or that you would have something to impart or to share or to give, but rather just to be in the middle of it and say like, man, I need it just as much as everybody else. And I understood in ways the value of that. And so I think I saw you as that type of person at the time that could have been really served well in that way.
Well, you mentioned a lot of important things. And I think, at the time it was interesting because you were telling me, you even offered to help me get on it where you were at the time. When you started district, that I could come down there and whatever that would look like working, an entry level job, which kind of looks like a poor decision on my part not to do that now that you guys have grown so much. But, I think, but at no point did I feel like from you that you were trying to take me away from church or tear down the church, or you were anti-church, but instead I felt like you were giving me advice that would help me be a better minister and leader by understanding what regular people go through. And not only that, but I needed that. I needed to get out of that, constantly running things out of church in order to really benefit as a believer myself, which I think, some people may find it hard to understand that kind of advice being beneficial to someone's church experience. But you benefited because you were working as, I'll let you tell the story, but you were working full-time at the church, but eventually you started working part-time and then not at all at the church. And but at no point were you less committed to the church. It was your commitment to God's call in your life that led you every step of the way, which I think people need to hear about those kind of stories more in a time of deconstruction, where that word can be all the way someone who is like just taking a healthy look at maybe some unhealthy things, all the way to someone that just wants to burn any type of organized religion down. You were actually helping me take a look in a different way because of your own experiences. So I don't know, maybe you can kind of talk a little bit about why you went part-time at the church. I know I don't think you wanted to at first, kind of had to.
Right.
And then
Right.
maybe all the way up to you getting a new leadership position at your company. That was a really cool opportunity that you had.
Yeah. So I mean, I mentioned earlier, but 16 years old, God saved me, and then really in the same moment, I perceived that He was calling me, or was rather, planning that I would be in a full-time ministry position vocationally. And so from 16 on up to 23, that I was moving in that direction. So 7 years of just like thinking I had my head on straight. This is what I'm going to do with the rest of my life. Went to school for it, and knew that was always going to be what I was going to do. And so finally got the opportunity. And then a few years in, 4 years in, once it was, I was full time at the church. We kind of came across a difficulty in the church financially. We built a new building that we were unable to subsidize with funds. You usually need that. And so then we kind of took a significant pay cut. I had 3 kids, a wife, a mortgage. And so eventually it got to a place where it was such a significant pay cut that I said, hey, how about I go do something else full-time vocationally, and then spend a little time here, doing work still, obviously as the student pastor. So I did that for a while, did it for a couple more years, and then eventually passed it on to a guy who had spent a lot of time with in the student ministry, and had been with that team since the beginning when I was starting to lead it. And it was a great experience in terms of just leadership formation and opportunity to work inside of a church. I had a lot of space to lead in ways that I was, just trying to like figure out, in my early 20s, what does that even look like? And then, never felt like I was going to be away from that environment forever, and still don't to this day. And so that was about 10 years ago that I moved on from being in a church environment in terms of employment, even on a part-time level, and started working with a local group here that had 6 restaurants, a local restaurant group, 6 restaurants at the time. I became a general manager in one of their spaces, and then eventually kind of pitched a position to become a chief culture officer. Is what I read a great book, at least at the time. I thought it was a great book, and kind of gave me an idea. And so pitched it to the owners and gave like this super cool, unprofessional slideshow on some PowerPoint, and they like gave me the job. So that's kind of wild. But that was excellent because it was focused on leadership and culture and a growing company. We had a lot of vision to continue to grow in the city and even outside of the city regionally. And we eventually grew into 11 locations. And so I was a part of all of those restaurant openings, kind of boots on the ground, operations focused. But, what is it, hiring, training, leadership pipeline stuff, new managers for the next locations. And then, of course, just circulating around to all of the established stores after that. And then we moved into, that was a counter service, kind of quick service, fast casual restaurant that I was a part of. And then we moved into a full service restaurant and started a new brand entirely, just a new endeavor that didn't exist. And around that time, I worked with another guy who is now my business partner, and we worked together in that group. And we had been dreaming really for about 2.5 years at the time about what it could look like to become entrepreneurs. And then a third business partner, certainly before we started it, but he came and he was actually the worship leader at the church where I was on staff. Younger guy, finance focused, not really, focused on operations. So we didn't work together in that capacity too much. But Yeah, so we knew we were starting this new brand with this current group. We also knew that we had a dream to become entrepreneurs. And so we opened this new restaurant, kind of put in our notice around the same time, and worked there for
Can I
like
interject something there?
Sure.
Because I think it's a interesting part of the story, at least for me, because it involves me. That's probably why I think it's interesting. But I remember you invited us to this launch of your new restaurant, and it was like friends and family eat free night, where the kitchen could like do everything on the menu.
Well, of course, you got to invite Josh Robery for the family's free night.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
always
So
to take him up on that.
yeah, so we're like free date night. We were so poor, at the time. I mean, I'm like, living with my mother-in-law, don't own a car. So,
Yeah. And they're inviting you to like deliver pizza if the guy doesn't show up. And so you get that every now and then shift, huh?
yeah, yeah, yeah. So, we drove down there and man, it was awesome. This restaurant, like this was your baby. You kind of spearheaded the launch, that kind of a more upscale version of what they were doing. Not kind of, it was. And like, I just remember being so amazed by everything that I was experiencing that night. And then you lean over and like, I'm about to quit this place. I'm about to open my own restaurant. And I'm like, really? Like, are you sure? I like looking around, like how awesome this is. He's like, you're like, I'm gonna sell donuts. And I'm just like, what? Like, are you kidding? He's like, there's this handcrafted donut scene that hasn't hit the South yet. He's like, I'm gonna bring it here. I'm like, you're gonna sell donuts. And I'm like looking around, and you're like, that's not all. And burgers. I'm like, burgers and donuts. Does that go together? And you're like, egg gourmet coffee. I'm like, wow. Okay, man. I didn't want to poop on your dream or anything, but we drove home and we were like, gosh, has Aaron lost his mind? And I remember telling Amy's mom, about it, and we were kind of like, should I say something to Aaron? Like, this is crazy, like, should I try to stop him?
You're
and
like,
she's
dude,
like,
I know you probably had a great idea. You're like, man, I think we could go meet up at the Starbucks by Tanger. We've had a couple good conversations there already. We could do it again.
I could crush another dream of yours, at the same place. So Amy's mom, who I think of all my friends, I know you're her favorite, so Amy's mom loves you to death and thinks you're the greatest guy. But with that being said, she was like, Josh, he is going to ruin his family. He's going to go into so much debt. She's like, he's going to have to work so much. Like, what is he thinking? And so that's a little context. You're kind of breezing over the fact that you were doing this, but it was a big deal because you kind of had it made at this company. They loved you, and they didn't want to let you go. But I think what's interesting is when you told them that you were going to be a competitor in the same city, how they treated you was I think really important. Can you maybe talk a little about how that transition went?
Yeah, I mean, just they let me stay on and work. I mean, that was just super neat. We wanted to really, it was just out of integrity, honestly. Like, we were like, man, we're crucial pieces to this company. It's a growing company. It's a new brand on top of that. And so let's give them I think it was like almost right at 3 months notice, just to let them do whatever they wanted to do to replace us and move forward. And so we thought it was the right thing to do. We calculated the risk. Like, they might very well say, hey, this could be your last day, which honestly, that would not be uncommon. So they were very, very good to us. They allowed me to stay on board for a few more months. And obviously I had to continue working hard. And they trusted that I would do so during that time. And so it was a sweet kind of transition, and one that was like, I mean, just very fortunate. I don't know how common or uncommon that is. It just seemed like one of those moments of risk that seemed like it would have been worth it, because you want that kind of story to talk to your kids about one day, or to share with other entrepreneurs that are going to be inside of your company. Like, this is how it could be. And obviously, we did that. I did that a few years ago, and people, I mean, and I've seen people do that to us now, which has been excellent, where they give us advance notice, and we treat each other with patience through that process, and just take care of them as they're taking care of us. So yeah, it was a little risky, but worth it. And it finished really, really well.
Well, and I think about, the fact that they told you, hey, and if it doesn't work out, you can come back here,
They did
which,
say that. That is right.
and so you were crucial components. You were going to be competitors in the same market, and they didn't fire you, and they said, hey, if it doesn't work out, you can come back on. And I remember about that time, I was thinking about the prodigal son and how he left the father's house. And get spiritual here for a second, if you don't mind. But I was thinking about when he left, the father didn't fire him. He didn't just kick him to the curb to teach him a lesson, but he actually gave him the blessing that he asked for and let him go out and do what he wanted to do. And you think about that blessing, he didn't bless him because he was right. He didn't bless him because he was going in the right direction. But I felt like God showed me something during that time that you and I were both going through transitions, that the father blessed his son so that he would always know where home is. Because if he was successful, then his father believed in him. But if he wasn't and he needed his father, he would always know where to go back to. And when you don't treat people well, when they're transitioning, whether they're doing it for the right or wrong reasons, they're never going to come back because you've taken what could be a place of strength and security and turned it into a place of pain. And they're just going to go find a new home. But the father was smart with the prodigal son. He knew he wanted to bless him so that he would know where home, he would always know where home is, no matter where he was. And he came back. And in your case, it was different. You weren't a prodigal son. You were God had put something in your heart that I think is really, really amazing with the company that you started and with the vision for what you guys did. And I don't know, maybe you could tell us. I know I interrupted you and then totally took over the conversation there, but maybe
I think
up.
something. Yeah, I just think I remember. I don't know when this set in and what it was, that something I read or heard, but it just it always was very. As a young man, I remember thinking, like, man, when I was transitioning out of my parents' home, it was really easy to, like, this is the natural order, right? Where your parents raise you. And then I got engaged at 19. And I remember just telling my dad, like, I'm a young dude, and I was living in my parents' home at the time still, of course. And I told him, like, hey, Dad, I'm going to marry this girl. And you know what went without saying is, like, and I'm going to move out and I'm going to go start a new life. And like, I didn't have to explain any of that. It was just like, he raised me to launch. That's the idea, right? There was never a moment where it's like, whoa, let's talk about this. I feel like you're not being faithful here to the house and to, like, kind of engage and be about what we're doing. And this is like, this was like, of course, like, dude, like, how can I help? Can't wait for you to have kids. Like, looking forward to the wedding. Like, this is going to be amazing. And I think, like, work, I think ministry is the same thing, right? I mean, God brings people to us, and I won't even call them sons and daughters. I would just say brings other believers around us in a church environment, brings other co-workers who may or may not be far from God, brings them around us. And we have an opportunity not to be fatherly or motherly in our disposition toward them, but rather just have that same mentality, which is like, we hold these things loosely. Like, these are people that are not ours. Even my biological father knew intuitively, like, he is not mine. I do not control where he goes and what he does and if he should and when and all of these sorts of things. And certainly my dad was there for wisdom, and my mom as well, but like wisdom and advice and thinking through the process and am I ready and is it time? And certainly he didn't see things as did I in every single way. But ultimately he was a father who said, like, hey, this is an excellent time for you to go on a journey. And let me know if I can help. Let me know if I can be there. And so the same thing in employment, right? Like when people, and I've told this to so many people, through the years. I mean, we're eight years now. We just hit, and how many leaders have come through our organization and left? And for me to be able to just say, like, how can I help you? How can I serve you? There's a guy who just came on board to be an hourly employee who would have been a wonderful leader with us. But he wants to start a donut shop in our city. And he's working with us. And it's like, that's easy for me to think, like, it's just like my conversations during the interview process was like, how can I help you, man? Like, you're going to learn a ton by working with us about the the donut game, about hospitality in our city. You know, he's coming from Santa Cruz, California, and it's like, man, this is the right way to be. Like, how can I position you in a way that will help launch you to be better into the future? Like, how can I equip you? How can I help you? And there certainly could be like, you know, if I were on a bad day, and I hope I would never have a day like this, but like, don't let him in. Don't let him around. What if he, you know, and all these types of kind of scarcity mentality, right? As opposed to like, nah, man, we have something to give. We have a way to serve you. We have a way to get you ready to be another business owner in our city, because there are not enough excellent businesses who are there to serve people, right? And everything's the same in church, and also in a marketplace environment where it's the same thing. I mean, in New Orleans, I don't have to tell you, in every other city, there are not enough, and there are not enough environments where people can go to be discipled and to serve the neighborhood that they're a part of, and the body of believers that God has put them around. Any city you go to, and certainly in America, you could say, hey, we definitely have a lot of people who don't go to church on a Sunday morning. And how can people who are insiders and leaders in the church better equip younger leaders to go out and do that kind of entrepreneurial effort? And then what would it be like for young men to be able to tell mentors and pastors and elders in their church, like, hey, this is a dream of mine, and in 3 years, I think God has put this on my heart, and it's going to be like here in this city, and I want to stay here, and I want to serve all of the people, and can you help get me ready? That should be a very, very common way to approach ministry and church planting and church leadership, right? And I mean, I've had that conversation with my pastor, like, hey, I believe the Lord at some point is going to put me back in a vocational environment in this city to serve people in this city in a pastoral context. And I just want to like be as equipped as possible through this environment, to make sure that I can be faithful to number one, the Lord, and faithful to others. So, you know, please help me, please connect with me, please equip me, correct me, whatever it is that you're seeing, because one day I hope that, you know, God is going to do this in me in the future. And I've received that same grace, which is just like, great, that sounds good. Yeah, and let us know how we can help you. So what a great story. You know, back to your prodigal piece. You know, that's kind of my take on the same subject, and it's been my experience, and how gracious of an experience is that, and just life-giving and compelling. So it is neat.
Well, I love the whole stewardship principle you're bringing into it. I mean, even your own kids, you don't own your kids, you don't own your employees. We give everyone back to God. And I remember, you know, when I was stepping away from our position as youth and young adult pastors, that, you know, basically, you know, that's what I told anyone that asked. Hey, I was always only temporary. You know, I'm just a steward of the responsibilities God's given me in any season. I'm just giving you back over, you know, and that's what we have to do with each person is we have to keep in mind that we're stewards, and we're always just asking ourselves, hey, what is the dream in your heart? How can I help you get there? And then if I can't do that for you, then there's really no place for me to be in your life in that role as a leadership role. I need to let you go. You know, I wish more pastors had that perspective, you know, and more parents, you know. I think, you know, it's might not make it in the podcast, so I think even parents need to start seeing themselves more as stewards. And then, you know, I'm not teaching my kid to be dependent upon me. My kid is dependent upon me. I'm teaching them how to become independent in a healthy way, which means that they can find the resources within themselves to handle the challenges every day. And for the ones that they can't, they depend on God for, you know, and, you know, it affects every area of life. And a pastor told me something one time that I think really helped me understand the stewardship principle that you were talking about. And that is, if you demand people's commitment, they'll look for freedom. But if you give them freedom, they'll give you their commitment in return. And I've taken that approach to like everything I've done, because I know what it's meant for me. When people say, hey, you're free, you know, we'd love to have you, but you're free to go. Well, then I'm not looking to go because I know it's a safe place. But you're saying, hey, there's nothing better for you outside of this. We're the best. There's nothing good for you outside. Well, that's not right. So I'm gonna start looking for freedom. And I've been able to recruit some great interns from Highlands College to come help us at ARC that are way overqualified at times. And I just always tell them, hey, this may not be your last spot. I just want to help you get to whatever that is. And I want you just to pray about it. There might be something better. This may not be it, but we'd love to have you if so. And I've just been surprised over and over again by how giving people freedom and giving them the freedom to express their dreams has actually caused them to give me their commitment. And people who could probably, do other things or stay with me because it's a safe place.
Yeah. Good news there for sure. I think people want to feel like they're appreciated and valued, not because of how they can help you build something, and that's something typically being your thing, but rather how you can build into them, and rather I should say maybe participate with God as He is. Scripture says that we're co-laborers with Him, right? So as we're co-laboring with God into these people's lives, that would be the proper way for people to feel like they are being served, rather than us inviting others to come and co-labor in what we're building. It's not our project. It's not our field out there, right? It is God's project. It's God's field. And we are just invited as leaders to co-labor with Him and in service to other people. And ultimately, this is not my church that I'm building. This is not my platform. This is not my business. This is not my family. This is God's ultimately. He is overseeing all of these things, and He is bringing about His kingdom into particular regions and neighborhoods. And we just get to be a part of that. And so what a gift it is to be able to participate in as other people bring their talents to the table, that we can help administrate and steward and direct and point, and have strategy, but certainly not power, right? And the role of making the calls and the adjustments and how their gift will be, and and it's my thing. Therefore, if it can assist me, then I will. But rather to point them into their own, what God is asking them to do. What a great gift it is.
I hope you've enjoyed our conversation with Aaron Vogel. I love how he always challenges me in my faith. I hope he's done the same for you. And as you've learned on this podcast, Aaron has started a coffee brand called Cool Kids Coffee, that a portion of the proceeds go to nonprofits serving children in need. You can get your bag of Cool Kids Coffee at coolkidscoffee.com. I've been to the roastery. I've seen where the coffee's made. It is really world-class stuff, and I know you'll enjoy it, and you'll be making a difference as you sip on your coffee each morning or afternoon or evening, depending on where your addiction level is. So I also want to thank Yellowbox. Yellowbox.co is a place you should go if you're looking for creative design, branding, development, any of those things, or just production, consulting. They do so many crazy, awesome things, and they have a kingdom-minded team that I know you'll enjoy working with. So check out yellowbox.co for more information about Yellowbox. We're very, very grateful to have them support us in this podcast. Thank you to Yellowbox. Thank you to Cool Kids. And thank you to everyone who has checked out my book, Believe Again, Finding Faith After Losing Religion. If you've enjoyed this podcast, please share it with a friend, subscribe, give us a full 5-star rating or whatever the highest rating is wherever you listen to podcasts. And I hope you join us next time. See you later.